Welcome to the Steel Flock podcast, where we discuss all things AFC North and the rest of the league through an AFC North lens. He's Matt and I'm Ryan. Thank you so much for tuning in today. In our last episode, we dove into the analytics for our four teams on their approaches to offense in 2025 and what it means for their offenses in 2026. In this episode, we're diving back into the analytics, but on the defensive side of the ball. Stick around to the end and you may learn something new and even get a little excited for this coming year. Let's hit it.
After wrapping up the offensive side of the ball, we'll go back to the heart of the AFC North, the defensive side of the ball here for part two. So just again to recap, we're going to be comparing stats from the new coordinators and play callers from last year's team that they coached for to try to see if there's any changes in store for the new teams to compare the rates from our teams last year and see what might be different. So we're going to go all around the AFC North. Start with the Baltimore Ravens here. Obviously, a lot of changes. Jesse Minter is the play calling on defense head coach. But we're also going to look at his Chargers from last year, but we're also going to look at the non-play calling defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver. I'm sure he'll be involved in the game planning as well. And I also wanted to bring in the Seahawks here too, because we can kind of get a sense looking at the Chargers and Seahawks of the real shape of this kind of Ravens 2.0 defense that is arguably kind of the new meta on defense for the league right now. And for the Steelers, what do we have, Ryan?
So in episode 2, we talked about the new coordinators and a little bit of their resumes coming into our respective teams. And with Patrick Graham, as you know, he comes over to Pittsburgh from the Las Vegas Raiders, where he was there for a few seasons as their play calling defensive coordinator. The Pittsburgh Steelers and its fans are excited to have a change of pace from the Terrell Austin tenure. It's going to be different. Patrick Graham is going from the fourth cheapest defense to the league's most expensive defense. So it'll be interesting to see where he takes it and how he runs with it.
And even beyond the years, I think it was 3 head coaches where the front office was like, okay, do whatever you want, but you got to keep Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator. So he's clearly bringing a lot.
He was the one constant. Yeah, the one constant over a very tumultuous few seasons.
All right. So for the Browns, just real quick, they're bringing in Mike Rutenberg. He was the defensive pass game coordinator for the Falcons in 2025. So I'm involved with the game plan, I'm sure. Maybe not like the full game planner, but we're still going to look at the Falcons to kind of compare to see if we can learn anything about the Browns next year. And the Bengals, of course, basically running it back. So we're going to look at just league average to kind of get a baseline for, how the Bengals are, planning their defense versus the rest of the league. So up first, deception and aggression. We're looking at sort of two of, I think, some of the core principles of defense in the current era. So we're looking at the disguised coverage rate. So how much post-snap secondary rotation type of movements the defense was doing to disguise their coverage, and then the blitz rate, how often they blitzed. So again, kind of why we wanted to bring in a few different examples to compare to. We can see that again, the shape of this sort of Ravens 2.0 defense, which Zach Orr is a part of in Baltimore. I think looking through this, we might see, okay, the scheme had some very strong principles at its base. It's just that a guy without play calling experience maybe wasn't quite wielding it situationally the way it should be. But, with the Ravens, they're at a 41% disguised coverage rate, which was third in the league. Very close to the Seahawks at 39.4, which is fifth in the league in the highest rate of disguised coverages. Chargers are actually a little bit behind, 33%, and that's 13th. So, again, Seahawks and Ravens, very close. You can see that, these two guys coached McDonald and Zach Orr a lot together and learned a lot from each other, I'm sure. So, the Chargers might moderate that a bit if it's in line with last year's Chargers. But we do see the Dolphins also top 10 in disguised coverage rate at 36%. So beyond the disguised coverage, though, looking at how aggressive they were with the blitzes, again, the Ravens and Seahawks very close, 23%, 23.2% blitz rate for the Ravens last year. And that's 21st in the league, so well below average, actually. The 25.9% is the average for the league. And the Seahawks, again, close behind at around 22%, and they were 24th in the league. Chargers, even less aggressive at around 19% blitz rate. That's 29th in the league. So I think what I'm kind of thinking about here when we compare these two defenses is they're very, very similar, right? They don't like to blitz at even a league average rate, which is, of course, maybe not the sort of like organized chaos heritage of the Ravens, but this is kind of, again, that Ravens 2.0 defense that has been fine-tuned over the years. The thing I did want to highlight, though, is the other coach coming out of this same system, Anthony Weaver's Dolphins. They're fifth in the league in blitz rate at 31%, so well above the average. And this is where the personnel part comes in. I think out of all of these teams, arguably the Dolphins had the worst personnel on defense. You could argue the Ravens are pretty bad as well when it comes to the pass rush also. And I think Zach Orr maybe just, obviously we had, I think the lowest sack total in the league last year. I think they're for the Ravens. So we weren't getting pressure, and he was just not willing to push the blitz button to try to get home. They just played coverage and hoped for the best. Whereas Anthony Weaver also not able to get home with 4, but just wanted to take those risks with the blitz to try to solve his lack of pressure problems. So that to me is, again, before the Crosby trade, I was looking at the Dolphins like, wow, are we going to have to kind of dial up that blitz a little more than Jesse Minter did with Khalil Mack and some other pieces? But I guess that that might change a little bit. Yeah, Jamie, thoughts on that, Ryan?
What's interesting about the Dolphins is they're a good mix of both, disguise and blitz. And so it just seems kind of like balanced in a sense. Normally, when I see these two things, disguise rate or blitz rate, I feel like very often one needs to substitute for the other to offset how creative offenses are. Defenses also have to become just as, if not more creative. And so I can see why you have Jesse Minter for the Chargers, Weaver, and McDonald, that their disguise rates are higher than their blitz rates because they're trying to combat the more creative offenses that they have to play. I mean, look for the Seahawks. Look who's in that division, right? You got McVay and you got Shanahan. Straight blitzing, you're going to get burned because Shanahan and McVay are the masters at, game planning around quick throws in case there are blitzes and whatnot. And so I think that you have to be creative on defense, which is what Minter and McDonald needed to do. And then for the Dolphins, it's probably a little bit more balanced because, again, of maybe who is in the division. I mean, you have the Bills, you have the Jets, and you have the Patriots. And, of course, the Patriots made it all the way to the Super Bowl and whatnot. But I feel like, and I think a part of this also is impacted by schedule. But I think that's probably why the Dolphins were able to be a little bit more, I guess, balanced in approach in terms of blitzing and disguise rate. So like if your defense or the talent that you have on the defense is like only okay, middle of the road, you have to be creative to leverage the talent that you currently have on the team. But if you have someone like a Myles Garrett or like a TJ Watt who can kind of just get pressure and then you just throw in that extra linebacker, you could get home probably a lot quicker or more effectively. So, I kind of see them as substitutes for each other, but it's definitely impacted by the talent who's on the defense and then, of course, the schedule and things like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's jump into the Steelers here.
Yeah. So, yeah, kind of like what I was mentioning here. For the Raiders, You have them at 35% disguise rate, which was 11th, ranked 11th. And then with blitz rate, kind of you flip it over. They were at a 21.7%, and that's close to the bottom at 25. And then you flip it over, and here you have the Steelers over here with disguise rate at 28.4, and then that's ranked 18th, and then blitz rate at just under 30%, which was ranked 8th. And so kind of just carrying along with what I was saying earlier, I think because Pittsburgh just has better talent on the edge, that they could just leverage those talents. You throw in an extra linebacker or whatnot to blitz, and then you get home to the quarterback. And so these numbers don't surprise me, and also I think too, Terrell Austin was not overly creative with his defensive play calling. So when you have coaches like that, because if he was great, he would still be on the team, kind of like what happened with Patrick Graham in Las Vegas, right? Like if he
Right.
was the man, then regardless of who was head coaching the Steelers in 2026, he probably would have stayed. But
Unless it
Terrell
was a Mike
Austin's
Short
offense,
situation, what if he
yeah,
what if he said, I'm the new head coach or I'm walking. Take
yeah,
me or leave it. I'm the genius here. It's not the players, it's
I
me.
know. No. But yeah, and then so it's no surprise that there was a much lower disguise rate than a blitz rate, at least in terms of the overall rankings. I mean, just based off of numbers alone, you have one at 28%, one at 29%. So it's like pretty close, kind of like Anthony Weaver's defense in Miami the year before. But you can see, at least from a ranking perspective, it's different. So I wouldn't just go off of the strict percentage rate alone, but to see where it ranks, across the league, and how often they used it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean
But
it'll
both were
be
below
yeah,
average, though. I mean, for the
right.
Steelers, disguise rate and blitz rate were below the league average, and then yeah, with the Raiders' disguise rate was 5% above the league average, which is pretty significant. Again, I think that just goes back to creative play calling, because you look at who is in the AFC West, right? You had the Broncos, you had the Chargers, and you had the Chiefs, all teams that are excellent. And so you need to be creative in your defense. And I think Patrick Graham just needed to do that. He needed to be creative and use disguise rates to leverage the talent that he had on the team.
Mm. Yeah, totally. And in terms of the blitz rate, yeah, I mean I think that is fascinating because if Rodgers does come back, I think obviously he's going to get the ball out really quick. So that's going to affect the other coordinators in the division, how often they can blitz. And Joe Burrow holds on to the ball for a really long time, but can also, get his throwing motion out pretty fast if the play call is set up that way. So, yeah,
Well, I
we'll
mean,
see.
Pittsburgh totally. Uh, I mean, they'll never say it, but I'm very sure that that last game against the Browns, Rodgers was throwing the ball super fast so that Myles Garrett wouldn't break the sack record against the Steelers, and unfortunately, it resulted in the Steelers losing because I think that was the focus of the offense more so than actually scoring points and winning.
Yeah, yeah, that's so petty. That's so funny. Classic Rodgers.
No one wants to set records with the Browns, or let
Yeah,
the
be on
Browns
the
set
other side of
records
it.
against them. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of the Browns, we're gonna, Jim Schwartz, he's been in the league a long time and he's probably pretty stuck in his ways, I would imagine. So he's probably seeing all these changes that the Ravens are making and thinking, that's not for me. I know what I'm doing here. So 18.7% disguise coverage rate. That's dead last in the league. Well below the 31% average. So he's just lining him up, doing his thing with Myles Garrett. Whereas the Falcons, they're up at 33.2%. So, almost double at 12th in the league. So I would expect quite a bit of a change there. Yeah, and again, I think your kind of question is whether there's kind of a tension between the disguise coverage rate and blitz rate, and I think that can be the case depending. And it all comes down to coaching. I think I think if you can really coach these guys to all flow together like 11 players as one and rotate and blitz and have all those complex um operations happening basically at the same time right after the snap, then you can get home really well. And Mike McDonald's guys did. But if you're bringing a bunch of guys in who just have never really done that before, and maybe composed of some free agents and things like that without a lot of continuity, I could see there being some real growing pains for people that try to copycat that Mike McDonald system next year. And yeah, blitz rate, not surprising, right? That they're well, I guess they're a little above league average. They're at 11th in blitz rate. So even with Myles Garrett, they are blitzing a little more than maybe you'd expect. But I'm sure someone like Jim Schwartz is enjoys kind of cooking up these blitzes to get the offense on their back foot. So interestingly enough, the Falcons, who had some juice at pass rush, with some young talent on at the edge, they still blitzed at the second highest rate in the league at 34%, which is still, around 6% more than the Browns last year. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible that the Falcons, again, with that worse personnel, we're trying to compensate on both ends with more disguised coverages and more blitzes. And maybe Mike Rudenberg was kind of forced to be a little bit more creative and might bring that to, an even stronger group with Myles Garrett and the rest of the Browns team. So I think this is kind of, I'm sure a lot of Falcons fans were sad. Browns fans were sad to see Schwartz go out the door, but it may be a blessing in disguise, I think, for the Browns. I don't know what you think, Ryan.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this goes, because you also think about, and I know I keep bringing this up, but the division that they played in. They played against the Buccaneers, they played against the Panthers and the Saints, So I think because the overall competition was not great, I think that gives you a little
Yeah.
more flexibility to do both. Try and be creative with your disguise rate, but also try and hit home with blitzes as well. So, but it'd be interesting to see once you hit the AFC North offenses, especially with kind of what we talked about on our last episode with the approaches that these new offenses are going to take. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if these numbers change for sure.
All right. So yeah, let's move on to the Bengals here. This guy's rate 27.6%. That's 21st in the league. So below average. 17% blitz rate. That's dead last. I mean, when you just have Hall of Famers all over your D-line getting pressure every snap like the Bengals, you don't even need to blitz, right?
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
That's
That
so
front
funny.
four
Yeah.
is
Dominant. Yeah.
unbelievable. Unbelievable how incredible future Hall of Famers it must all be, where they don't have to blitz that often and they don't have to disguise coverage. And that's obviously why they were the #1 ranked defense in the NFL last season. But, as a casual viewer, you hear the announcers talk about just how bad the Cincinnati Bengal defense was. And when you see this data, it really just drives home that, man, that defense had no idea what it was doing. And obviously that comes to coaching. But yeah, I mean, I knew that they were not good, but gosh, like when you have like the D line that they did, you would think that they would feel compelled to blitz more, to try and disrupt the pass protection. But I guess not.
Yeah. Or at least hit them with more disguised coverage, just kind of maybe get a little bit more juice, a little bit more dynamism out of whoever you do have back there, which is obviously not great. But if you don't have the if you don't have the personnel, you got to kind of give them something to work with scheme wise. And yeah, they kick Dan and Rumo to the curb, and doesn't look like the new guy is really doing much to help those guys out either. No. All right. So, yeah, we're going to get kind of more into scheme tendencies here. So, sub package rate, that's just any time you have 5 or more defensive backs on the field. So, kind of lumping in nickel, dime, quarter, not much, I'm sure, but quarters, all that lumped into one number there. Light box rate, heavy box rate, 6 for 7 and more. So we're going to kind of look at this to get a picture of kind of what these defensive schemes actually looked like. And again, I think for this podcast episode here, we're not trying to look again at the performance, right? Because the personnel is so different. We're looking at the tendencies, the actual sort of makeup and foundation of the scheme, because that's going to be what's going to be continuous, right, between these two teams. So from that perspective, again, we're seeing, okay, what does this sort of like Ravens 2.0 defense look like? Again, the Ravens and Seahawks, number 1 and 2 in sub package rate. So they're playing these nickel or even lighter defenses a lot. So Seahawks first at 92%, and the Ravens right behind them at 87% against a league average of 68%. So way, way above the average. And of course, if you're going to look at any of the actual performance metrics, the Ravens are miles behind the Seahawks, right? But the core sort of, principles of this defense, which is obviously very effective with the right personnel, are what Zach Ward was calling for the Ravens last year, even though myself and most of the fan base hated him. So, I'm sure he'll figure things out, and probably Zach Ward probably does have a bright future later on in the league. But again, it's the difference between, to some degree, personnel, and to some degree just however Mike McDonald is maybe coaching these guys in Seattle to be more cohesive, just made that defense so much more effective than the Ravens one in terms of actual performance. But right behind them, 78% is the Chargers, 6th in the league in sub package rate. So again, those three really, really similar. And the Dolphins, once again, the outlier, they are at a 63% sub package, so actually below average, 23rd in the league. And if you know anything about the Dolphins secondary last year, you can see why, right? Like they just didn't literally had no one to put on the field in the secondary, so he was probably thinking, I'm just gonna put more line of scrimmage guys, put different non DBs on the field. They were starting guys like Jack Jones, who was cut from the Raiders and was like their number 1B corner for the year. So yeah, not really surprising that he just didn't feel comfortable with that nickel or lighter type of coverage. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Ryan?
I think this definitely is impacted by the talent again that you have on the back end. 92% for the Seahawks at a sub package rate. I mean, that they just had a lot of confidence in their secondary and then a lot of confidence in their front four just to place enough pressure where the DBs can kind of do their thing. And then I think that also goes back to the I think it's probably, I don't want to say easier, but it may be simpler to do your disguises with DBs instead of linebackers. So I can see that too. I mean, just like corner blitzes and everything, like it's obviously if you only have so many corners but more linebackers, just you're not gonna be able to do that kind of stuff. So, I think it's definitely combination of personnel and just how creative that they want to be. I think it's probably easier to run disguise packages with DBs instead of linebackers.
Right. And yeah, I think there's a tension there, but with like the actual just time speed of the players as well as their football IQ, right? Because if you have lighter players on the field, they can get to that next spot they need to get in for that post-snap rotation quicker versus having heavier personnel who may not be able to do that. They're just by nature of their weight and just stuff they can't really control. So yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, so yeah, we can see definitely how these are correlated, right? If you're those, Ravens, Chargers, Seahawks, they're running you know, lots of nickel, and they're leaving those boxes really light. Um, Ravens are a little interesting in that respect, where they're actually around league average in light box rate, um, even though they're second in the league in sub package rate. So, I guess they're kind of trying to find that thread, that needle of still keeping some guys down there to stop the run, even in a personnel that's lighter. So yeah, I mean, this is, I guess we'll kind of see, because I do think everyone's going to try and copy this next year. Like, can you replicate this, or did Mike McDonald just have these just total dogs at DB that can come up and stop the run? This is kind of like the trend league wide, I think, is to cap these big plays, maybe give up a higher success rate versus a lower explosive rate, that being the trade-off, which is going to happen when you have these light boxes. But yeah, I just, yeah, just in terms of division, yeah, I would expect that we're going to see a lot of continuity here between the Ravens and Chargers. And, you know, all three of these guys, I think, to your point about personnel, it has to be emphasized. These guys have absolute dogs at safety, like the Ravens, Hamilton, obviously. The Seahawks have Eman as a rookie just wrecking the field, and Chargers have Derwin James, who's really hits like a linebacker at safety. So, you know, with three probably first round stages who could potentially be that, I think we're going to see, an acceleration of that league wide. Yeah, moving on to the Steelers here. What do you see, Ryan?
Well, Steelers have their sub package rate at 61%, and that ranked 27th. And of course, it makes sense that led to a 41, just under 42% light box rate versus the heavy box rate at 27.5. What I take from that is, well, secondary has and continues to be a challenge for Pittsburgh. They just can't really seem to hit on people like they were in the past. I mean, outside of Joey Porter Jr. and yeah, I mean, I guess Deshaun Elliott. I mean, he's no elite. I mean, he's no Kyle Hamilton, or anything like that. But just in general, like the secondary has not been a strong point, and so I can see why they rely more on their linebackers, which is why the heavy box rate is higher and ranked 12th.
I mean, you gotta keep Patrick Queen on the field for every down. You wouldn't wanna be without your dog there, Queen.
I know, potential cut candidate, right?
Yeah.
to save Pittsburgh over 10 million in cap space for free agency.
Come play
But
for Minter. Come back, buddy.
the way I kind of look at it too is, I don't know if you recall, Pittsburgh traded up a number of years back to draft Devin Bush, and he struggled in Pittsburgh, goes over to the Browns and had a much better year. So, of course, the whole point of this exercise and then the last two episodes is just how much coaching makes a difference. And so you can see here that even the Raiders too, last year ranked second to last in sub package, and then ranked second in the heavy box rate at 35.4%. So again, I think the front seven probably just there was a better chance of of success, I guess you could say, with your defensive linemen and your linebackers than your DBs. I mean, Jamal Adams actually did really well, I feel like, last year for Patrick Graham on the Raiders. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh brings him over. But I mean, he's still no Kyle Hamilton, Emma War, anything like that. But he was also that big safety that could play in the box, play outside, but definitely more of a versatile defensive back that really
Yeah.
fits in.
I was pretty shocked by this, honestly, as someone who, yeah, kind of I looked at the Raiders a lot, going into last season. Because Jeremy Chin, I think, really is close to that Kyle Hamilton prototype, just kind of like, a B minus version of it. But he had a really strong year, and I think Graham utilized him really well and revitalized Jamal Adams' career. And yeah, that an even more linebacker type role as opposed to the safety role or whatever they played before. So yeah, a little surprising to see them, so low in sub package rate. But again, as we mentioned in the other episode, they turned over their entire back seven starting lineup from year to year. So maybe you don't want to. Maybe that just you're not going to put as many DBs on the field in that kind of scenario. You just don't trust them to run what you want to run. So yeah,
And that kind of makes me a little worried, though. I mean, even though Pittsburgh has the most expensive defense, I mean, their secondary is still kind of what it is. I mean, hopefully they can beef it up in free agency or in the draft. But, unless that improves, Pittsburgh may still have to not run as many sub packages versus, having those linebackers on the field. So we'll see, because I mean, Patrick Queen was not so good with tackling, but I mean, he's very athletic. Peyton Wilson is very athletic. Jack Sawyer is pretty athletic. So maybe they're athletic enough, but I guess it's to be seen what happens with free agency and the draft.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really, really strong linebacker class. So yeah, if you're going to move on from Patrick Queen, this is the year to do it, I think. So yeah.
Not that Pittsburgh has any shot at getting Sonny Styles, but
Yeah, but yeah, there's names in almost every round, I think. So depends on how much they want to invest, but it's a good time. Like,
yeah, this is a good linebacker draft.
yeah. And yeah, moving on to the Browns. Yeah, I don't think this is too surprising here. 28th in the league in sub package rate, third in heavy box rate. He's just lining them up, putting his guys on the field, his big guys on the field, Schwartz, and just having them try to win. Falcons were at also below league average, but 7% higher rate. So at 67% versus 60, they're 21st in the league, which is actually pretty close to league average at 68. I guess I saw, it definitely seems like with this contrast, though, I would expect Rudenberg to kind of, again, bring a more balanced approach and a more modern approach. Yeah, I think the Falcons were more of a 4-3 team also. So, yeah, I think there's quite a bit of portability between these two scenarios. Do you have any more thoughts, Ryan?
No. It's interesting that the Browns and the Falcons, along with Pittsburgh and the Raiders, just all ranked so much higher in the heavy box rate. Of course, Runberg will try to modernize the Browns defense a little bit more, but I think he'll still continue to rely on Myles Garrett to do what he does, and that's why he gets paid so much money. But yeah, I think, I mean, that defense has a ton of talent, so I think you're able to run more of these heavy box sets just because you have the talent right up front. So I can see it changing a little, but probably not like a crazy amount, given who is already on the Browns defense. They have the personnel.
Totally. Yeah. So for the Bengals, I guess where we've seen them kind of be actually well behind the curve on a lot of these other metrics, they're really league average across the board, 16th or 17th in all these. So they're right around league average and sub package rate at 70%, whereas the average is 68.4%. That's probably, given how much they are probably playing from behind, they probably should have been playing even more in sub package. But it is what it is. And yes, league average and heavy box rate right at 16th. They're just 0.2% off the league average at 25.5%. So they're pretty much, in line with the trends that are happening in the league, which again, aren't static. I wouldn't expect this to be the same league average next week. I would expect the sub average rate, honestly, to be quite a bit higher
To
next
go
year,
up.
just league
Yep.
wide. Yeah.
Go up. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just looking at this, basically middle of the road, right? And I think it just, again, demonstrates what kind of coaching the defense had last year, where you don't really disguise that much. You don't really blitz that much. You kind of are still figuring out whether to do your sub packages or whatnot. That's why you're kind of just like middle of the pack, is you don't have that identity on which one you kind of do more. And so you're just kind of playing around just to see what works. And, obviously it didn't work, but yeah, just with the last set of data and with this one, I think it just continues to tell the same story about the level of coaching that defense had last year.
Yeah. And again, we can, maybe he's better at play calling. I don't know in terms of that nitty gritty of it, but it does seem at the 10,000 foot level that the scheme is just doing these players no favors at all. They're going to play at the level of whatever their personnel is, and it wasn't great. So, yeah.
You just laugh. I mean, I don't think there's anything else you can do but
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Not
And
giving us much to work with here, the Bengals.
yeah, I know. And at least last week the Bengals had a little better statistics offensively, and versus like the Browns that we were making fun of them, but in this episode it's definitely uh yeah, much better with the Browns than the Bengals on the
Yeah.
defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. You can't just be league average and everything when you have like a bottom 5 personnel in your personnel. You got to find something, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, going into coverages, there's a lot of numbers here on the screen, but really, you know, we're looking at man versus zone and middle of the field closed versus middle of the field open. And obviously, we're just going to see, that these are heavily correlated, right? If you're running a lot of man, you're going to be heavy middle of the field closed, whereas in zone, you're probably going to be a middle of the field open quite a bit more and more like a cover 2 kind of thing. So, this one was very interesting to me because I think it's really the first sort of like perspective or window on this high level look at the scheme that we have, where the Ravens are quite a bit different than the other sort of like Ravens tree guys, when Minter's Chargers and McDonald's Seahawks, where the Ravens were 6th in the league in man coverage rate at 30.7%. That's well above the average of around 23%. Chargers less than half that, 31st in the league in zone rate, and Seahawks in that same ballpark of 27th. Dolphins are right around 15th, which is interesting, again, given the personnel shortcomings that we talked about, where you might expect them to go more zone if they just don't have anyone there. But that again is probably, there's some idiosyncrasy there where I think Jack Jones is like a not cerebral type guy. So maybe you just have him in man more, and that leads you to that. So yeah, basically they're all correlated, right? Ravens are sixth in man coverage rate and 4th in middle of the field closed rate. So they're rotating the safeties, keeping someone high. Malachi Starks, who they took in the first round, probably playing that role quite a bit more, obviously, than Kyle Hamilton. So I think what we're seeing, and in this, again, it may be one of those key reasons, along with the personnel, why the Ravens' defense performance was so bad compared to the Chargers and Seahawks. I think it is a zone league now. It's 71.6% zone. And we're just seeing that transition of these two Seahawks Super Bowl teams, right? We had the Legion of Boom that unleashed like years and years of the NFL copying them, and it was all about getting your man cover dog like CBs and these big hitters in the secondary. And Mike McDonald went totally the opposite. So I think to kind of sum up where I see the Ravens tree kind of leading the league meta on defense is that they're taking these sort of like stereotypically like soft sort of like kind of stances where they're in zone a lot. They're not blitzing a lot. They're in nickel personnel a lot. They're in like none of the sort of like stereotypically badass kind of hallmarks that you think of when you think of defense. And the flip side of that is that to do that, you need the most badass guys who hit way above their their weight to run that effectively. And Mike McDonald, is coaching the hell out of these like little DBs to all hit like linebackers and close to the ball and get turnovers. So that's what I would love to see, for the Ravens next year. But, it remains to be seen. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
I was surprised too, actually, that the Ravens ran as much man as they did compared to zone. And, we can move on to the next slide because I'll mention something similar with the Steelers as well. But you can see here that they, like the Ravens, ran a lot of man last year too at 31.1%. And of course, the zone rate which was much less and ranked kind of near the bottom at 26. And yeah, the numbers all correlate like you talked about on the last slide. But I think that's kind of where Orr and Austin didn't play to the strengths of their team. I mean, with Pittsburgh, you had Joey Porter Jr., but nobody else that would even come close to being a shutdown corner. I mean, look at Jalen Ramsey last year. I don't have the specifics, but just, when I was watching when he was forced to play man, he got burned a lot, especially in the red zone. And so I think that Terrell Austin just didn't play to the players' strengths. And then when you throw Jalen Ramsey as a big nickel / safety, his performance went way up because, again, you played him in a more appropriate position with his current skill set. I mean, a number of years ago, he was that shutdown corner with Jacksonville and the Rams, but that's just not who he is anymore. And so where Pittsburgh failed was definitely not leveraging the players to where their actual strengths are. And then with the Raiders, complete opposite. They were 6 in zone and 14 in man. And again, that's where you see that the Raiders also had the higher disguise rate package because they played more zone. Definitely for the Raiders above the league average in zone rate, and then way lower for below the league average for man rate. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess for me, what I look forward to in 2026 is adapting more of that zone coverage, more modern NFL defensive schemes. And I think just with the personnel that Pittsburgh has, that zone will probably play more to their strengths than just straight up man-to-man coverage. Because kind of like we talked about with the Legion of Boom, you had Richard Sherman, just complete shutdown corners, right? And so you could play man, and then you have Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor in the back, just destroying people, right? That just so happen to get past them. And the Steelers don't have personnel like that. And so they just can't play man. And so being that Graham plays more of his own defense, I think that'll better fit to the personnel that Pittsburgh has on defense.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much third man. I think if you can get into zone, I mean, that's, sort of step one if you're going to play against a mobile quarterback, like Lamar, right? So if you get into those zone looks more, and that's your kind of bread and butter, you'll be more prepared against Lamar to be able to get turnovers and limit his running ability. So yeah, so this is kind of what. Yeah, did you want to take a stab at the Browns here? At what you see here?
Well, I mean, number 1 in man rank, number 1 in middle close rank, and then complete opposite, bottom of the league for zone. So yeah, just for the listeners, 43.4% man rate, which ranked first and was essentially double the league average. And as we've talked about on many of the slides now, Jim Schwartz just, hey guys, go line up over there. That's your guy. Don't let him get past you. Let Miles Garrett do what he needs to do. Just, you know, cover these guys for just a couple seconds and, we're good. And so that theme just continues to apply with each slide that we progress through.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if you saw these rates like a quarter century ago, you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's just what everyone's doing now, right? But yeah. Yeah, totally different approaches. So yeah, we'll see what kind of balance they can get into next year. But yeah, I don't know again how much you're really losing with Schwartz going out the door there. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, he's as straightforward as you can be, it seems like, with all the slides that we've been going through. It yeah, it's just really taking advantage of that natural talent that the personnel has, and so to get a little more creative, it could make the defense actually even better. So
yeah,
that's kind of a scary thought.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, could be a lot of creative solutions coming next year. All right. So yeah, Ryan, take us away on the on the Bengals.
The numbers correlate again between man zone, middle, closed, and middle open rate. Again, kind of with the previous slide, very, very middle of the road, not creative, just trying to trial and error until they get something right. Unfortunately, they didn't. But I mean, so they did rank 11th in man and of course in the top 10 for middle closed rate as a result of that. But no one area that really stands out or truly gives the Bengals defense an identity. They were above league average in man rate, below average for zone rate, and just nothing to write home about. I think just the Bengals continue to, at least their 2025 team with each slide continues to just demonstrate that they were not up to snuff last year.
Yeah, and I guess the man rate being that high, I think is surprising. I think, and we're seeing, with the exception of well, actually, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm surprised when I didn't think that in 2025 necessarily that we would be division wide such a high man coverage rate, but that's a pretty common theme across the division here that we're seeing. And the Bengals I would have thought would be even heavier zone,
Zone.
but I guess, I mean, I know they moved Dax Hill to corner last year. Maybe they just loved him so much in terms of his cover skills that influenced it a little bit, and they wanted to get him into man coverage and take advantage of his skill set because he was very successful after that conversion. But
That is a
yeah,
really good observation, though, that all the basically all of the AFC North teams were high on man, and then all of these new coaches coming in is zone. So that'll definitely be not only scheme, but I think kind of like what McDonald did with Seattle is there's going to have to be some level of culture change too on the defense side of the ball, especially with different approaches, with the new coaches coming in. But it's 2026, we can't continue on with the way that we have been because our defenses have been, meh, especially last year. And so I think just these fresh perspectives and a change in approach might just be what each team needs to take it to the next level. I mean, the Bengals will stay the same because they're running it back, but at least for all the teams with the new coaches, I mean, I really think the AFC North is going to look different in 2026.
yeah. Let's see. Ravens at 6th in man rate, Steelers 4th in man rate, Browns 1st in man rate, and Bengals, despite the worst personnel by far, 11th. I mean, that's pretty shocking. And I wonder, just given how badly this entire division has done in the postseason, in recent history outside of that one Bengals Super Bowl run? Is it that they're building these teams to win in the division against man, and then in the postseason they're playing way different, way more zone heavy defenses that are also way, way better. And they're just maybe not prepared for that. I don't want to overwrite that, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about having looked through this. Because obviously you're trying to win the division first, but here winning the division looks a lot different than winning a Super Bowl or winning it, again, the playoffs against these teams.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's, if everyone is playing man, then that's how each team is preparing for. And then when you need to, in December and January, when you're playing these other teams that you're not familiar with, they'll put the defense in uncomfortable positions with different play calling that is just different from everybody else in the AFC North. So I can definitely see there being a lot of struggle from AFC North teams when they get into the postseason, should they get into the postseason, and just not be creative enough to address all of that by the other teams.
Yeah. So with bringing in all of this, now we're getting those coaches that maybe they would have lost to in the postseason to come bring in that intelligence. So hopefully,
100%.
see more success there. So yeah, we're gonna kind of jump through, wrapping up these 2 episodes here, kind of this deep dive into scheme. What are kind of some of the key questions here? So for the Ravens, one of the big things I'm wondering here is how, with obviously compensating for, on the one hand, having Michael Penix as your QB, and on the other hand, having Bijan as your running back, the Falcons, they went outside zone 58% of the time. And that's 20% higher than the Bears last year, who obviously, where Declan Doyle is coming from. So with the league average being 26%, and an under center conflict there, like 28% higher under center rate for the Falcons versus the Bears. So where the Ravens land on that is going to be interesting. Are they gonna kind of keep Ledford's run game coordinator input to just like, okay, you're the running game guy, but we're going to help you coach up our guys on the outside zone, but we're not going to call too much more outside zone? Or are they is he going to really bring a more shotgun heavy approach than Doyle is used to? I think is going to be fascinating because these are on paper totally different philosophies for the run game. So we'll see what happens there. And then on the other side of the ball, again, the Ravens 3rd in disguise rate, but 21st in blitz rate, last in the league in sacks. Can they continue to just live without getting pressure? Again, you see, a different approach with the Chargers and Seahawks where they're close to the bottom of the league in blitz rate. So yeah, maybe it'll just be real easy and they'll just get home with 4 next year, but we'll see.
And I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Matabuke? He was out last year, right, with injuries. So, you plug him back into the center of the defense. That sucks for the rest of the AFC North teams.
Yeah.
That's who, is part of your defensive line. So I'm not looking forward to that, but I'm sure that the sack production will definitely go up for Baltimore in 2026.
There's literally only one way to go when you're 32. So
yeah, no kidding. And then Owe, right? He goes over to, the Chargers under Minter, and then does really well over there, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable, right? I mean, not to go on too much of a tangent, but you have this guy who runs sub 4.4, like in the 4.3s at 255 pounds. He has 10 sacks last year. And he's doing nothing. You just can't figure out how to use him in his final season with your team. And then he immediately goes to the Chargers, and Minter watches like 1 week of film and then turns him into like one of the biggest sack producers in the league and now he's like a top 10 free agent. Whereas coming off the Ravens, if he'd stayed there, he would be talked about like one of those consolation prizes in free agency. Whereas now he's like, one of the prizes. So, yeah, just a really frustrating, frustrating situation.
Sorry to bring that up. It's a pain point.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, this is one thing I thought was really interesting with the Steelers here. Do you have any thoughts on this, Ryan, for the Steelers?
Yeah, well, I definitely believe that with McCarthy's play calling, with Angelico's game plan, I can definitely see the man gap percentages going up because that's just that's their style of offense. As the Steelers' young offensive line continues to mold and gel with under the tutelage of James Campen, who's their new O-line coach, I only see it going up, and I definitely expect more of a man gap style next year.
So you wrapped up the ground game for the offense, but what are we thinking for the defensive side?
Yeah, so I mean, same thing with on the offensive side. I think the approaches to coaching on the defensive side with Patrick Graham, the zone scheme I think will better align to the current personnel that the Steelers defense has. And so again, I just think that with who Pittsburgh has on their defense, and of course this may be impacted by the draft, but even if Pittsburgh were to hit on all of its defensive draft picks, kind of like what we talked about, the zone schemes are kind of the direction that the league as a whole is going, and it allows for more creative disguise packages. And so I hope that the Steelers adopt more of those zone coverages.
Roger. Okay. And yeah, do you want to walk us through maybe some of the changes we might see for the Browns on offense?
Next year is going to be hard for the Browns. We talked about this on last episode. You have 5 brand new offensive linemen coming into Cleveland in 2026. And as much as the Ravens, especially with Monken, and I believe, didn't he also bring over like the run game? He brought over the run game coordinator too, right? From the Ravens or something like that as well. So, they're going to want to run the ball. And I think it's just overall, I think it's going to be challenging to really kind of establish something, at least the first year. Maybe in the 2027 season, things might kind of come together a little bit better because that offensive line, assuming that they'll remain as one unit in 2027, I expect it to be a little bit more put together. But yeah, next year, I'm not sure, like what they're really gonna be able to. It's less about what they want to do, but and more about what will they be able to do, given who is going to be there.
And I just wonder too. I would say like in a vacuum, maybe if you don't have the strongest linemen, just in any respect, right? If they're just, not even just in terms of their athleticism, but just, how good are they at blocking? I mean, if you don't have the talent, maybe you'll lean more on outside zone, right? But at the same time, if you have 5 guys who have never played together with a brand new head coach, brand new O-line coach, are the dance steps maybe a little bit more complicated in outside zone, and you might have more growing pains there with these guys who don't know how to coordinate with that outside zone sort of like, formation and all the different sort of contingencies there. Yeah, they're in a tough spot.
And we might honestly see it shift too throughout the season. Like in the beginning when they're still trying to figure it out, they might run more outside zone, and then midway through the season, kind of like at least in the Steelers case for last year, their interior offensive linemen were better than their, tackles. And so that's kind of where a lot more of that inside zone came into play because that's just where the better blocking was.
Mm.
And so, that could shift throughout the season for the Browns depending on kind of where the strength finds itself, within that offensive line unit.
Yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. So, what do you think here about the Browns' defensive changes?
Well, Jim Schwartz is not in the building, and kind of like what you said about the Ravens being last in sack production. I mean, there's only one way to go but up, and I think, I think that the defense could actually get better in 2026 by adopting more zone coverage and things like that. So, I I, I definitely feel like it's not going to be as much man in 2026 as it was in 2025.
Okay. All right. So, having wrapped up the Browns, we'll stop at our favorite place here in the division here with the Bengals. Ryan, do you have any takeaways from our analysis last couple episodes?
I think the only way for the Bengals as well is up. Um, Kind of what we talked about last episode. I think for the Bengals to start adopting more under center looks, they'll need to improve their offensive line. I think just being in shotgun gives Joe Burrow that extra second or so, to try and make the play work. As compared to, he takes it under center, takes that 1 second just to back up and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that until they improve their offensive line play, Joe Burrow will probably continue to operate a lot out of the shotgun.
Yeah, that's gonna be it's gonna be a big question here. And the defense, can we expect any changes for the Bengals, or what do you think?
I'm expecting more of the same, I mean, fortunately for us, unfortunately for them. I don't even know what his name is. But but unless, the defensive coordinator is presented with data like this, I mean, for him, it's hard because probably for him, he's like, I think what will make a big difference is an upgrade in personnel. But then you have a team owner who doesn't want to spend money on anybody. So I think you're kind of in a tough spot where I know I could do better, but I'm limited with the resources that I have because of an owner that doesn't want to pay money to help improve the group that I have.
Yeah, I mean they're in a tough spot. I know. So is Al Golden is their defensive coordinator, and I know defensive guru Match Quarters. I don't know if you watch him, but he did a video that towards the end of the year he was maybe trying to incorporate a few new things on the defensive side. But obviously in terms of the seasonal rankings in most respects, they were not very impressive. So yeah,
More or less the same, I think.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it in terms of the scheme, right? So I think we've tried to go like building this foundation. Okay, well, who are the new coaches, right? And what beyond the coaches, what scheme stuff are they bringing in? And yeah, hopefully, yeah, I definitely learned a lot going through this. I don't know, what do you think, Ryan?
Same. I mean, as much of a fan as I am for the Steelers and the AFC North, on my own time, I did not dive as much into the analytics as we did over the last couple episodes, and I wish I had done it sooner. It's exciting, and well, it can be exciting. It can be depressing. I mean, it can be a number of different things, but it just paints a clearer picture of how these teams go about offense and defense. And it either supports how you feel or it completely surprises you. Like, I mean, I had no idea that the AFC North defenses ran so much man as compared to zone, relative to a lot of these other teams. And so, I mean, I wouldn't have known that unless we did this exercise. So this was a great idea. All the credit goes to Matt for this. So I definitely learned a lot, and I hope all of our viewers did as well. And I would love, or we would love to hear what defensive analytics shocked you guys the most. We'd love to hear from you. So please throw something in the comments, and we would love to have some back and forth with all of you. And with that being said, that's it for today's episode of the Steel Flock podcast. And at any rate, no pun intended, the AFC North may look completely different next year, and I think it's really exciting, and I think we could become even more competitive, more modern, and all of those things. So I'm definitely excited for the changes that will come to these teams in 2026. And so yeah, thanks again for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and throw up a like if you learned something like how Matt and I did while doing this exercise. So yeah, again, he's Matt and I'm Ryan. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.